If you are looking for a rational definition of what the soul is, then you will be looking into all eternity. The soul cannot be described, but it can be described by its effects and how it works. In that regard, it is very similar to electricity. Nobody has ever seen electricity, nor will ever anybody see electricity. Nevertheless, do we believe in its laws and use those laws to make the unseen work for us to produce an effect in the seen world. We are even willing to pay for something that nobody has ever seen on a monthly basis. To call your body or your mind the actual you, would be the same fallacy as to call the light in the light bulb to be the electricity, or the turning of the electrical motor to be the electricity. All these things are just pointing to a power behind which can do an infinite amount of things. The way electricity can benefit us are infinite, and we have not even begun to tap into the potential of that infinite power. Its powers are only limited by our own concepts of it. So it is with your body and your mind. If you choose to label your body or your mind to be the actual you, then you find yourself to be imprisoned by your own assumption and must experience yourself on the level of the body and the concepts you accepted in your mind. You restrict your infinite potential by the same infinite power that produced those concepts. The soul is basically that infinite power that can project anything that the spirit assumes into it. In order to grasp the working of the soul, we need to start from the infinite, as it is not possible to take any finite concept and cram infinity into it. You got to let everything go, and I mean literally everything. All your ideas, concepts, objections, arguments, worldview, religion, superstitions. All that needs to go in order to follow along with the next steps of understanding. Now, I take it that you were willing to let all that go. Then we all arrived at a common universal infinite I am that is at the core of all of us, where the I is infinite awareness and am is infinite consciousness, meaning that I is infinitely conscious about its awareness. To be conscious about something or of something means to have an experience about, of, or with it, e.g. you might have an awareness that there are over 8 billion people on the planet, but you might only be conscious about a rather small amount of people that you had an experience with. With the understanding of the difference between awareness and consciousness, we can grasp that infinite awareness has the infinite desire to know itself, experience itself, therefore to become conscious of or about itself. Since awareness was the only thing present, it must therefore be omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and with that in the same instant the I was infinitely conscious about itself in its amnesis. Since the desire to know itself is infinite in the direction of expansion, there is no direction in infinity, but we use it as a mental picture. It is also infinite to the infinite particular, and in that instance I am contracted spiritual assumption to I am that, with the that being the individual soul. As you can see that we started out with infinite consciousness, and therefore anything and everything that comes out of it must be consciousness as well. This concludes that consciousness is the only form substance that there is, and to consciousness we must turn to understand our reality. If everything is consciousness, then of course the soul is the infinite particular consciousness experiencing itself as that, the concept of yourself. And since infinity remains infinity even in the infinite particular, the soul must be infinite as well. Every particle in the universe is an infinite particular of the I am to a particular that, in essence, every particle has a soul. But only the human soul has expanded back toward the infinite I am that discovered its own awareness of being, that the concept of yourself, your self-awareness of being. All other infinite particular particle souls are only conscious of their particular but cannot make a choice. The only consciousness that is embodied in them is what they mirror or express. Since all is consciousness, the rock, the tree, the animal, the planet. The human soul, having discovered the spirit within, is currently torn between two states, but is constantly driven by the desire to expand. The one state is that through its awareness it gives attention to the outside world, and through its powers to assume states it takes these states as absolute and begins to think from them, creating a subsequent experience from what it assumed to be its foundation. This of course traps the individual soul in sequential experience pattern that is felt as past, present, future, or simply time. The second state is the internal vision that the soul is conscious about, e.g. it desires success and immediately sees images of success within its mind, but since the majority of its attention and assumption is with the senses, it cannot see of how it could create an experience from an inner vision versus the real, outer vision. Again, all is consciousness, and therefore the outside vision and inside vision are states of consciousness, and for the creative spirit of assumption it does not matter from where the vision comes from for experience. There is no difference to the spirit to base it on the outside or inside image, e.g. if the soul believes it is not favored by life and must remain poor, then the spirit accepts this assumption and the experience will always be poverty no matter of how much the individual is doing. By judging, having an opinion about its outside world that it has powers of its own, through the senses, the soul is always limited by its own concepts and therefore always experiences lack, suffering, deprivation, e.g. if the soul assumes that health is contained in fruits and vegetables, then it will always be a slave to fruits and vegetables in order to experience health, but health is not in anything but on the inside of the soul's concept. If the soul wants to experience health, it has to first assume that it is health, and then anything and everything the soul does will express that health. Once the soul has accumulated enough experiences and suffering based on its own limited concepts, it will come to the point where the desire to break out is bigger than anything else it desires. With that dominant desire receiving the majority of the attention, the soul will discover its own creative pattern through the spirit of assumption. It will discover that anything and everything it experiences were assumptions it was willing to make for one reason or another. With that knowledge, the soul will withdraw its attention from the world and direct it toward the inside, inner eye or imagination. This will starve the rational mind or ego. The soul will realize that whatever it sees on the inside and accepts as true by the spirit of assumption, it will and has to experience on the outside, as within so without. Once that pattern has been understood and tested through actual experience, the soul has found its creator and becomes one with infinite I am to further experience into all eternity, but now without judgment and therefore without suffering and limitation. The human as soul is at a very exciting point in its expansion where on an individual basis it can master its attention and punch through the veil of space-time, Newtonian world, to time, space where its true self resides and where it is united again with the knowledge of its own omnipresence, omniscience, omnipotence. Remember, we are human beings, and not human doings, meaning we have to be first before we can do.